You need me to sign you in again?
I would like to call to order the regular governing board meeting of the Jefferson Elementary School District for October 12th, 2022. Ms. Covray, may I please get members present?
Manufo Leah Inga Anawai,
Here.
Marie Brizuela,
Here.
Andrea Jordan,
Here.
Shaquille Ali,
Here.
Clayton Koo.
Here, thank you. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Scott, could you lead us in tonight's pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next is the approval of tonight's agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Item 5 is public hearing. Public hearing to review and approve a resolution on the district's sufficiency of pupils' textbooks. The governing board of the Jefferson Elementary School District will hear public comments on the resolution stating the sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials at every school for the 2022-2023 school year is consistent with their alignment to state content standards in most recent adoption cycles. I will open the public hearing at 7:05 p.m. Are there any speaker cards?
We do not have any speaker cards.
Okay. Okay, seeing no comments, I will close the public hearing at 7:05 p.m. as well. Next is communications, 6A, board member acknowledgement and commendations. I will start on my right, Ms. Linganawai.
Thank you. I will just say that I hope everyone is energized in the at this midweek point, as some of us, such as myself, have felt a bit of exhaustion. I enjoyed the 3-day weekend. I hope that many of you got to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. I was surprised to see that DMV was open and packed, and I was actually a little bit disappointed to think that people had to work on a day that was reflective of the people standing in line that day. But I hope that others had a different experience. I got to spend some time learning from a Shellmon group in Berkeley, so I really appreciated that opportunity to do that this weekend, and I haven't done that in a long time. And it is my hope that we continue to stay well. I've had family members in my household as well that have been impacted still by COVID. So I want to encourage people to continue to get their boosters, take advantage of the vaccinations that we're offering in the community, and to practice the protocols that are in place to keep us safe. But wishing you all a wonderful rest of the week.
So I don't have a lot to report, just we had a great weekend, so that was good, all rested. And I would like to welcome any of some of our new folks that are coming on to say, when they come, welcome. They know who you are. And other than that, I really don't have too much to say, other than everybody wants to help me put my house back together again. Come see me. Anyway, go ahead.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to say that we're getting into the holiday seasons. It is apparent. I've seen the emails coming out from the schools around Halloween. So I know the kids are getting excited to dress up again. This year is probably a little bit more open than it was last year. So I'm really excited to see the costumes and the parades that our schools are going to be having. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is I know that Trustee Ali brought to the attention of the board last time that he wanted to discuss split classrooms. And so I just wanted to voice that again because I do think, and I support him in his request to talk through that with the board as well as the superintendent. And I look forward to tonight's meeting.
So could you explain about the split class?
I will let Trustee Ali speak to that as he was the one that requested it at the last meeting.
So there was a request by Mr. Ali to hear information about split classrooms, how often we have them compared to other years, and we're preparing a report for the board. It'll be at one of the upcoming meetings.
Yeah. It was, I know you still look confused. It was because that some teachers and people in the community asked me some questions about that. And so I thought it would be appropriate for us all to hear it and for the whole public to hear the information.
So could the superintendent tell us, do we have any classes that are split?
Oh, yes. Yes, we do. So, and that's, we're preparing the report on how many we have this year compared to how many we've had in previous years. So, and it'll be on a board agenda at the upcoming, if not the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge that, and I actually didn't know that last Wednesday, October 5th was World Teachers Day. And the way that I found out was some cookies were dropped off to my classroom from the culinary class. Yeah, so, and then October 8th, there was a celebration at Marchbank Park, Kasayahan Sa, Daly City, celebrating Filipino American History Month. And it was a great event. A lot of youth were there representing, and a lot of vendors, food trucks, entertainers that showed their support of Daly City. And that's it.
I don't really have much of an update since our last meeting. I'm just hoping everybody stays safe and healthy as we head into the holiday season. 6B, superintendent comments.
Yes, so on my mind today and on many educators' mind today has been the false calls into police departments across the Bay Area that occurred today. 6 high schools in the Bay Area were hoaxed, had SWAT teams show up at their sites. Calls had been made into police departments saying there were active intruders on the campus, and the police departments, as they're trained to do, responded, but they were all false threats. And so I hope this does not become a trend, that we're going to need to not only worry about real threats, but false threats too, which still excite all of the same nerves and fears and emotions as a real threat until you know it's false. So thoughts are with those school principals, staffs, and students, and hopefully this will not become a trend. Just for the board to know, we do work very proactively with our law enforcement agencies, and I will bring this up or have one of our staff members bring it up at one of the following meetings to identify ways that we might be able to confirm threats before acting, because we could delay something by 15 seconds if you just asked if it's true. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Next item is item 7A, consent agenda. The administration recommends approval of the start items on the rest of tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Next item's item 8B, resolution number 22-10-12, availability of textbooks and instructional materials. The administration recommends approval of resolution number 22-10-12 that ensures that students in the district have enough textbooks and other instructional materials in each subject area that are consistent with their alignment to state content standards and most recent adoption cycles. Mr. Vidal.
Yeah, so this is a resolution that we do annually before the 8th week of school is up, and today I think is the 7th week. It goes with the public hearing that was held at the beginning. So that's, we do have all of the supplies and textbooks that the board has adopted in our classrooms.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? If not, I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2220 12
Second.
concerning that all the children will have their books.
There's a first and a second. Ms. Covary, may I please get a roll call?
Ms. Leah Inga Anawai,
Aye.
Mrs. Brizuela,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan,
Aye.
Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Koo,
Aye. That was adopted 5-0. Next item is item 8D, California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. The CASP results in English language proficiency assessments for California LPAC update. The administration will share results of the 2021-2022 California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, CASP, for grades 3 through 8th, and provide an update on the English language proficiency assessments for California LPAC. Good evening, Ms. Scott.
Good evening. All right, let me see if I can. Oh, look at that. Okay. Success so far. All right, good evening. So our purpose tonight is to share with the board an overview of our most recent state assessment data and the actions we are taking in response to the data. The two assessments we will review are CASP and LPAC, and I'd like to welcome Jessica Pace as my co-presenter. So we'll begin with our CASP data. CASP stands for California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. It is a computer adaptive online assessment administered to all students in grades 3 through 8. This assessment is based on the California Common Core state standards and measures student progress in English language arts, ELA, and mathematics. Our state assessment system reports student achievement using 4 level descriptors. Level 1, standard not met, that's the color orange. Level 2, standard nearly met, color yellow. Level 3, standard met, color green. And level 4 is standard exceeded, which is the color blue. So for the 2021-2022 school year, 46% of our students met or exceeded standards in English language arts, and 33% met or exceeded standards in math. The majority of our students scored in level 1, standard not met, and level 2, standard nearly met. While students had fully returned to in-person learning last year, there were still many factors in play as a result of the pandemic. Managing COVID testing, mandated isolation requirements, extensive contact tracing, lack of staffing, and sub shortages no doubt put a strain on our learning environments. So let's examine how these current CASP scores compare to pre-pandemic data. So on the slide and the following slide, we have disaggregated the overall data by elementary, which is in the teal, and middle schools, which is in the gold. Data from FDR, being a K-8 school, is split into both elementary and middle school. So as we compare our most recent ELA scores to scores from the pre-pandemic years, notice there is no data indicated for the 19-20-20-21 school years. We can observe that despite the enormous challenges, our staff were able to maintain a similar level of achievement in English language arts throughout the pandemic. When reviewing our math data, we can see that our elementary math scores dipped just slightly after the 2019 data, but are still within achievement range from prior years. However, our middle school math scores were exhibiting a decline pre-pandemic, with even lower achievement scores as a result of the pandemic. Our math data appears to be similar in nature with districts across the state. This graph, published in a recent EdSource article, highlights, especially in the upper grades, California's low performance in math prior to the pandemic, and then a greater decline due to the pandemic. As we see on this slide, there continues to be an achievement gap amongst our numerically significant subgroups. The teal bars represent ELA and the gold bars represent math. When we overlay the district average in ELA and math, students identifying as Asian, Filipino, and 2 or more races are above the average in both content areas. This slide presents an overview of our ELA data by grade level. The colors again represent the 4 level descriptors. The green and blue bands demonstrate the percentage of students who met or exceeded the standards. Last year, our 7th and 8th graders were our 2 highest achieving grade levels in English language arts. In reviewing our math data by grade level, we see a similar trend as the graph published in EdSource. Our 3rd graders have the highest level of achievement, but that declines each year. And finally, when analyzing the performance of our English learners, approximately 16% met or exceeded standards in English language arts, and 13% met or exceeded standards in math. The vast majority are scoring in level 1, standard not met. Jessica Pace will now review the LPAC data.
Good evening. LPAC stands for English Language Proficiency Assessment of California. The LPAC is an annual summative assessment that is used to determine the English language proficiency of students whose primary language is other than English. The LPAC summative assessment is given only to students who have previously been identified as an English learner based upon the initial assessment results in order to measure how well they are progressing with English development in each of the 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In the 2021-22 school year, 1,867 JESD English learners took the summative LPAC. The LPAC consists of 4 levels. Level 1 are students who are at the beginning stages of developing their English skills. 18.5% of the students tested scored at level 1. Level 2 students have somewhat developed English skills, where 27% of our students scored. Level 3 students have moderately developed English skills, and 36% of our students tested at this level. Level 4 students is a level with well-developed English skills, and we have 18% of our students scoring at this level. Thank you. If we compare the 2021-22 LPAC results to the previous year, 2020-2021, we can see that our level 4 students increased in proficiency by 2.25%. Yay! The summative LPAC results are used as one of 4 criteria to determine if a student is ready to be reclassified as fluent English proficient. Reclassification is the process whereby a student is reclassified from an English learner, EL status, to fluent English proficient, RFEP status. To be considered for reclassification, a student must score a level 4 on the LPAC, demonstrate proficiency in basic skills as measured by either the CASP assessment or our local FastBridge, have a teacher recommendation that based on the most recent report card, the student is doing well, and parent-guardian consultation. We have 216 students, which is 10.7% of our students who have met the reclassify criteria this year.
So based on our review, we have some summary statements to share. So based on our recent CASP data, our students maintain levels of proficiency in English language arts throughout the pandemic, but lost ground in math. Our data continues to highlight inequities amongst racial and ethnicity groups. The number of students meeting or exceeding standards in English language arts increased in 7th and 8th grade. Our 3rd grade teachers are demonstrating the highest number of students meeting or exceeding standards in math. And finally, the number of English learners who have been reclassified has increased. So with equity at our core, we are actively taking steps this year in these broad categories to increase student achievement. So let's begin with collaboration. We spent much of 2021-2022 building a strong alignment of district collaborative teams. Our 4 core collaborative teams are governing board and the superintendent, district leadership, school site leadership, and teacher teams. The newest team of the 4 is our district-wide collaborative teacher teams, composed of grade level or content staff and facilitated by teacher leaders. The goal of this new teacher team structure is to develop collective teacher efficacy, the belief that teachers can more positively impact the learning of their students if they work as a team. According to John Hattie, author of Visible Learning for Teachers, accomplishing the maximum impact on student learning depends on teams of teachers working together with excellent leaders or coaches, agreeing on worthwhile outcomes, setting high expectations, knowing the student's starting and desired success in learning, seeking evidence continually about their impact on all students, and modifying their teaching in light of this evaluation, and joining in the success of truly making a difference for student outcomes. Our collaborative teacher teams will meet formally 4 times this year as they begin to build the foundation needed in order to engage this level of collaborative work.
Another step to improve student outcomes is through our board-adopted instructional materials. These programs ensure access to rigorous grade level standards and support teachers in delivering high quality instruction across all classrooms in JESD. This year, a committee of K-5 elementary teachers will begin exploring state-approved next-generation science materials. The Science Committee will review the 11 programs on the state-approved materials list, and using an evaluation tool, they will narrow that list down to 2 programs that will be piloted in JESD classrooms this year. In May of 2023, the K-5 Science Committee will be bringing a materials recommendation to you, our school board. We are very excited about bringing a new science curriculum to our elementary schools.
Ensuring our students have additional time and support to master grade level standards is a function of the California MTSS framework. MTSS stands for Multiple Tiered Systems of Support. This year, district and site leaders are working in collaboration with union representatives to develop an MTSS handbook that will clearly communicate across all sites the processes, supports, and resources available for student interventions and enrichments. Our new MTSS handbook will facilitate the alignment of intervention practices throughout our district, a process that can be quite complex and challenging without an agreed upon framework. Our goal is to finalize this resource by spring 2023 in order to effectively communicate to all partners the expectations of our district-wide MTSS system that will be in place fall 2023.
An additional step to improve student outcomes is through the development of a comprehensive assessment system. In addition to the state summative CASP and LPAC assessments we shared with you this evening, we have added curriculum-based standard-aligned assessments. These assessments will be administered 2 times each school year. Teachers will be able to analyze these standards-aligned assessment data to help inform instruction, monitor student progress, and provide targeted interventions, scaffolds, and supports to our students. Comprehensive assessments also help families stay informed around ongoing student progress. This year, our professional learning focuses on EL strategies and universal design for learning, UDL. This fall, at the JESD August Institute Day, teachers and administrators participated in sessions on instructional strategies that best support English learners. After the training sessions, sites selected 2 instructional strategies from the many that were presented in the training modules. Sites will use these strategies across all content areas during both designated and integrated English language development time. Teachers will participate in classroom visits to give feedback on the implementation of these strategies. Some of the strategies sites have selected are lines of communication, think, pair, share, outside-inside circle, and clock buddies.
Universal Design for Learning was an initiative begun 3 years ago and continues to be one of our district priorities this year. As a district leadership team, we are using the UDL playbook and corresponding online course as a way for our administrators to experience UDL as a practitioner, while we also strengthen our own leadership skills. For school staff, we purchased every teacher a copy of the newly released UDL Now book, along with individual access to the online courses as well. School administrators are leading their staff through these resources, working in partnership as learners to better understand how to apply the UDL guidelines into every lesson design so that all students become expert learners. Our PBIS, SEL, and restorative practices are fully integrated on all of our campuses. We monitor our progress through our Panorama survey results, which we report out on each spring. These systems have been especially key following the turbulence of the pandemic, which only exacerbated the mental health struggles amongst our families and students. We will continue to monitor and evaluate our progress in all of these categories as the year continues. We are committed to ensuring higher levels of student achievement, and we look forward to celebrating that success at the end of the school year. So that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments from board members?
Thank you. My first question is about, let's see, I'm gonna put these on. Can you go back to some of the slides? Especially the slides that show the inequity? Yeah, right there. Is there a way that we can get at some point a slide similar to the last slide that addresses this disparity, like the steps that the district has taken specifically in this area? Is that possible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then, I did want to commend the use of the handbook that you had, or for multi-tier systems of support. And also, you mentioned that focusing on UDL has been something that's been in the last 3 years. So I guess that would be something somewhat new or different that we're doing to try to address some of these issues. And, but I was also wondering, is there a way we could have a, and I'm asking everybody, a task force or a committee or, I don't know, a parent group or something else besides whatever we've done in the past to address this? Thank you.
Honestly, I'm still processing a lot of this. It feels like for years, math has been an issue. And for me, it's a concern that we would allow our children to go from elementary to middle school not prepared. Math only gets harder. It's going to get harder in high school. It's going to get harder in college. And I mean, and I heard the statement, or I saw the words of, well, it's, consistent across the county. I mean, this is probably not something I should say, but okay, that's not that I don't care about the county, but I'm a board member on this school district. And so for me to see that year over year is really concerning. And to Trustee Ali's point, it's like, well, if what we've been doing isn't working, then we need to try something completely different. We need to think of innovative ways to move this forward, or we're going to be 6 years from now having the same conversation. And if I have to be on the board for 6 years to make sure that this is not the same conversation, I am going to do that. I guess one of the questions that I do have is because I'm obviously a parent in the district, and when these assessments come out, I believe there's an email or there's a paper that's mailed to the family with the scores for their child. For the children that are constantly on level 1, and maybe they've moved from, third to fourth to fifth, and they've just remained on level 1. How are we communicating to those parents? How are we working with those specific families to move the needle? Because if it's just an email or a paper, I don't see how that's moving the needle on getting them to get better. And you may not have an answer for that now, but I would love to understand what we're doing specifically when it comes to those children. So again, I'm still processing, so I may have some questions after the fact.
And I just want to point out again that something that we're doing different are the collaborative teacher teams. So our middle school math teachers are actually their own team. So they're going to be empowered to dive into this data, to be able to assess their curriculum materials, and to start coming to some conclusions about their instructional practices that are getting these results. The power lies with them as a group to make change to improve student outcomes. So that is one system that we are utilizing differently this year than in past years that I think will have a positive impact. We have so many students at risk, right? So we have to look at it not just at that individual level, but at a systematic level as well.
And I understand that. I guess my statement on the individual was more so along the lines of, if systematically the same students over and over again are not meeting expectations, that is systematic, and those are the same students. And so, yes, it's individual, but it's also a group of the same. Does that make sense at all?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. It is a large percentage of our students. And the MTSS handbook that we're developing, I think, will also more clearly communicate to families and to school sites a process of how to intervene, when to intervene, what the intervention materials are, how long to use them, and how to evaluate their effectiveness. Did you want to-
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask another question before you go? So you helped me to remember another question I had. There was another slide that had equity in the middle. Can you show that one? Yes, that one. So I had two comments about this slide. I guess moving forward, how are we going to articulate how equity is at the core of all these different areas on there? And then I was wondering if there's a way that we could explicitly add parent involvement somewhere in this slide. That's what you helped me to remember when you mentioned parents. I don't want, to micromanage, so I'm just asking if that's possible or for us to at least think about it.
I heard two questions. One is how are we communicating equity as kind of the overarching principle? We did develop a one-page document that highlights the board's equity statement, even though it's still in a draft process, and linked that to the 3 district priorities this year, making an equity a thorough line through each of those different priorities. It continues to be in every conversation and every communication on our weekly newsletters that we send out, that this is the overarching umbrella that guides all of our work. And it's also a core element of the MTSS framework. Every domain that's featured in MTSS starts out with equity, an equity statement. And then the second one was about including parents. I think, yes, we can definitely create an action item around parent engagement.
Can I make another comment? Sorry. I appreciate that we are, I guess when communications we're sending out our draft equity statement, but I do want to point out it's just a statement. So how do you get the statement to work how do you make sure that it's not just a statement, that we're just not saying things and it's just words and no action? How do we hold the task force accountable for what we've put them, in charge of? I know it takes a village. It takes all of us to move this along. And I guess I'm just hearing a lot of words and what will happen. And honestly, I'm just concerned. I want to see some action. I want to see it in play. I want to see the step. Like, I don't know if I want, and how I put the superintendent, I probably want to see more, maybe on a consistent basis, some, I don't know, activity. I don't want to micromanage it, to Trustee Ali's point, but I want to see I don't want to wait until the LCAP to know that it's going bad. I want to know throughout the year that it's being worked on. We've seen some improvements, but we may have some bad scores probably. I want to understand what it is before I get the final results and then be kind of jarred by the fact that it's still a problem, if that makes any sense.
Do you want to share?
I was just going to say that one area that we want to get at is having more ongoing assessments and being able to really bring that data here to the board. But even more importantly, having our teachers have the time to really dive in at those checkpoints to see how our students are doing. If these assessments are aligned to grade level standards and the mastery at the end of the year, these are beautiful checkpoints for us to be able to act in the moment, determine who needs intervention, who needs additional support, and who are our high flyers who have mastered those standards and are ready for the next level, and not wait until those state summative assessments at the end of the year to determine our results. And so that was one of our action items this year. We began it last year with just our 3rd through 5th grade students for language arts, but we've expanded that to include our 6th to 8th grade, as well as our EL students. There'll be assessments 2 times this year for all of our EL kids. So stay tuned. We'll bring some data to you so we can check in before we hit next year's CASP and LPAC.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in too. I appreciate what I'm hearing from my colleagues, and I also want to say thank you for the presentation this evening, because I did hear about the feedback that is required around the strategies when they are implemented. But I do know, just from raising 6 kids and being in front of teachers asking for extra support, is that many times the parent engagement piece and strategies around how we are meeting families. Again, I think we've all said, and we're hearing, that we don't want to micromanage the process or the work that is being done. But I do think that some of our role is to provide some of the experiences that we are contributing in these seats. And I will say that I would love to understand the frequency of, like you just mentioned, of these check-ins and some of the detail that you just shared right now, Ms. Pace. I would have loved to see some of that here. I think that would have been helpful because you are naming action steps here to improve the student outcomes. But I think the detail you just shared now would have been very helpful for us to really hear of the deep dive that you are being very intentional about. And the parent engagement piece is huge. I do see, an increase in stability, especially post-pandemic. But I also just want to be honest too and transparent that I don't feel that's good enough. And it's really not to hammer down on the teachers and our educators and staff. I want to know how our community can come together and make a concerted effort as a collective, because this is not just putting the onus on the district. I believe that parents need to be engaged differently. So that's just my humble recommendation, is that if there isn't cohesion with the parents and the families, there's going to continue to be a disconnect in our children's performance. So I would love to understand better and hear maybe at a next checkpoint an update what things have been done differently around that parent engagement piece, and what those strategies look like, and who is all involved outside of the district, and what that looks like and also requesting of a frequency of the reporting, and to not wait for like the LCAP or things that are required for us to report out. I would like to set a standard of having more frequency around those updates, and encourage a level of parent engagement that is equity, meeting parents where they are. And so I didn't hear that today, but it doesn't mean that it's not being done, because you just unearthed some things that I think that if we put those details in the report, and those that are here at the meeting and those that are listening can have a better understanding of seeing us level out and why that's happening, but that there are actionable steps that are happening. So more of that would be wonderful. I appreciate the presentation this evening.
May I speak again? Okay. I just want to also remind us all that the Bay Area Ed Fund, they came here and they presented, and these are the things that they want to hear, things that we haven't done yet that we want to do. Those are the types of things that they'll support us in, if I heard them correctly. So we need to think big and think creatively, and put that out there so that we can get support to make it happen.
Sorry. I do want to say thank you. I know I seem a little harsh. I am just passionate about this. And so I appreciate the work and the effort that you've all put in. I understand, again, like I said earlier, that it does take a village. And so I do agree with Trustee Ali. If we have people that are willing to support us, programs that are willing to support us, we would like to, again, think of innovative ways to move things forward. I heard about that science curriculum, so I'm excited about that. But then I'm thinking, well, math, what about our math curriculum? Maybe we need to re-engage and look into that. Again, it's like what we've been doing is not working. So we really do need to think of other ways. And again, this is not to be harsh, but it's just a reminder that, we are all here on this board to hopefully move forward in a positive way that's going to affect student achievement. Even though it may not be one of the superintendent's goals for the year, it's always a goal of this board that our students are achieving at a high level, regardless of what the county is doing. And I just want to make sure that you all understand where I'm coming from. So thank you.
And I just want to reiterate, one of our goals tonight was to highlight what we are doing differently to achieve different results. The equity piece, I want to go back to the UDL. That is about equity. It's about understanding who the students are in your class, the barriers that come with them, and then designing lessons to meet their needs where they're at to get them to grade level standards. That's different. It's a huge mind shift for people and how they approach teaching in the classroom. And it's going to take a long time to see something really substantial and change. We're also looking at policies and how we are implementing board policies around equitable practices. And we're doing that within a leadership team. So I just want you to hear that it is a key initiative and focus of us as a district.
Thank you again. Just want to check any other additional questions or comments from board members? If not, thank you, Ms. Scott, and thank you, Ms. Pace, for presenting tonight. Next item is item 9D, KeyGen presentation on district general obligation Measure J bonds. Representative from KeyGen will provide a presentation on the opportunity to issue 2022 election GEO bonds Measure J Series A to fund upcoming construction and facility improvement projects. Mr. Lauro.
Good evening. I have here with me Ms. Hyatt, and she is a representative from KeyGen Advisors. They are JESD's financial advisors when it comes to issuing of debt, the last Measure J, and they prepare Ms. Superintendent Vidalis and I in our bond rating meeting with Moody's, and she's going to give a presentation on what's to come in the Series A issuance of our Measure J.
Good evening, and thank you for having me back tonight. I'm here, as Mr. Lowe mentioned, to talk about the first series of bonds from Measure J. So let's start our presentation. So as you all know, back in June of this year, your voters approved Measure J, which was a bond measure for $45 million. It was approved by 62.5% of your voters, which was above the 55% threshold. So again, congratulations on the passage. We're here tonight to talk about the first series of bonds to be sold under Measure J. It did have an estimated tax rate of $15.70, and this will be the first series of bonds to be issued. So before we get into the issuance schedule, I wanted to talk a little bit about assessed valuation, because whenever you sell bonds, you have to make a projection of where you think your tax base will be in the future, because that tax base repays the bonds. So here we have data for the district's assessed valuation, which represents all taxable properties within the district's boundaries. Last year, the district's AV grew 6.8%, which is outstanding. And your long-term averages, all shown there, are very strong, up to 5.3% over the last 30 years. So we use these figures to help us decide on what to use moving forward. And we'll talk a bit about that in a couple slides. Here we have a snapshot of interest rates going back to 1972. So the chart on the left shows the historical perspective, and then the chart on the right shows just a one-year history. I'm sure you've all read the news. We know that interest rates have been rising. The Federal Reserve has taken action to increase rates 3 times this year, 0.75% consecutively at the last 3 meetings. The next meeting is scheduled for November 1 and 2, and so we're hoping to get these bonds sold ahead of that next Federal Reserve meeting. So here we are with Series A bonds. The tentative plan is just held $22.5 million, so the first half of Measure J, to be sold in a few weeks, and we'll talk about timeline in a couple slides here. But this is a snapshot of what this bond series might look like. So in terms of usage of the funds, we'd use about $11.1 million to repay the 2021 certificates of participation. And then the other half, $11.1 million, would be used to fund other bond projects within the district's boundaries. We're estimating an interest rate of about 4.7%, and we're assuming for Series B, the second half of the measure, could be up to 6%, just as a placeholder. In terms of the tax base growth that we talked about a couple slides ago, we're assuming 1% next year, then 2%, then 3.5% over the long term. So you can see we are very conservative to the district's historical growth. And then the chart on the right shows you what those tax rates would actually look like for your voters. I mentioned that voters approved a $15.70 tax rate, and you can see how we layer Series A, this issuance, and Series B to come in a couple years on top of each other, such that taxpayers pay a level tax rate in every single year. So before you tonight are a very large stack of legal documents for your review. The most important of those documents is the authorizing resolution, which authorizes the districts to sell the bonds. It specifies various terms and parameters and also gives district staff the ability to take the necessary steps to get the bonds sold in a few weeks. It also approves the form of various other documents, the largest of which is the preliminary official statement. That's the document that actually goes to investors to review. And a few others mentioned here. These are all in form, meaning that there are a number of blanks in there for things like interest rates and repayment schedule. That is because, of course, we haven't sold the bonds yet. So that information will be filled in when the bonds are sold. So in terms of timeline, just last week, Mr. Vidales and Mr. Lauro went up to San Francisco and presented an updated profile to Moody's to get the district's credit rating updated. And we're here tonight with great news. We got the news this morning from Moody's that the district's AA1 credit rating was affirmed with a stable outlook. So fantastic job to district administration for executing that. The next steps, assuming the district board is willing and able to approve the resolution tonight, next week we would circulate that preliminary official statement to investors, and the bonds could be sold as soon as October 25th, which would get us ahead of the Federal Reserve meeting in early November. And then the interest rates would be locked in at that point, with a closing to occur in early November. And that's all I have for you tonight. Are there any questions?
Cool. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, excuse me, a lot of what you discuss when you come here is very high level. So I'm going to ask kind of a basic question. What's the profile of like who's the average? Is it wealthy individuals? Is it corporations? Who's buying these bonds?
It's both. It's usually there is a small amount of retail investors like you or me, but typically it's more like bank trusts, retail, and larger banks. So we might see usually somewhere between 10 and 30 different investor groups participate in the bond sale. So after the sale, we're able to provide a list to the district of who purchased the bonds if you'd like that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe this is information because the next item is to approve it. Okay. If there are no other questions, I will proceed to next item, which is 9E, which is resolution number 22-10-12A, a resolution of the Board of Education of the Jefferson Elementary School District authorizing the issuance of Jefferson Elementary School District, San Mateo County, California, election of 2022, general obligation bonds, Series A, and actions related thereto. The administration recommends approval of resolution number 22-10-12A, a resolution of the Board of Education of the Jefferson Elementary School District, authorizing the issuance of Jefferson Elementary School District, San Mateo County, California, election of 2022, general obligation bonds, Series A, and actions related thereto.
So continuing after Ms. Hyatt's presentation, this authorizes the district to move forward with the issuance of the Series A of Measure J of $22.5 million, paying off our 2021 COPS loan that we had took, and moving forward with the sale of the bonds, allowing us to finance projects across the district.
I move that we approve resolution number 22-10-12A, authorizing the issuance of Jefferson Elementary School District election of 2022 general obligation bond Series A and actions related thereto.
Second.
There's the first and second. Ms. Covray, may please get a roll call.
Ms. Leah Inga Anawai,
Aye.
Mrs. Brizuela,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan,
Aye.
Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Koo,
Aye. That was 5-0, unanimous vote. That motion was adopted. Thank you very much, Mr. Lorraine. Thank you much, Ms. Hyde, for coming.
President Cool. Apologies. I would just like to request that when we do the sale, I would like to get the names of those that did, because she mentioned that we could get the names of those that did purchase those bonds. So I would just like to request to get that once that's.
Sure, I think we can, Ms. Hyatt can send that to us and then we can forward it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines.
Next item is item 12A, Board Policy Administrative Regulations June 2022 CSBA Board Policy Updates, first reading. The board will review and revise board policies, administrative regulations from the June 2022 CSBA Board Policy Updates as stated in a first reading.
Yeah, and just for information, these updates reflect legislative activities of the spring. We pulled out the independent study one that you approved. We pulled out of the September update because we needed it sooner. But these are all minor changes that happened.
Any questions, comments from board members? If not, I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make a motion that the board approves the policy/administrative regulations for the June 2022 CSBA policy update.
Second.
There's a first and a second. I just want to double check. I see a note here about a roll call. Is a roll call needed first or a voice vote? Okay.
No, I don't think a roll call is needed.
Okay.
Apologies for that.
No worries.
Voice vote is sufficient.
Okay, cool. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Next item is item 13 under Board Governance Matters. 13A, contracted services with McPherson and Jacobson LLC for superintendent selection, facilitation, services, and timeline. The administration recommends entering into a contract with McPherson and Jacobson LLC for superintendent selection, facilitation, and associated prescribed services. This contract will be paid from the general fund. Mr. Dallas.
Yeah, so you have in your attachments there the proposal from McPherson and Jacobson, and we do have a representative from McPherson here. So Ms. Nicole Anderson, who is not a stranger to you because she's worked with you with a different hat, but she's partners with McPherson. So.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you again. And hello, Maurice. Good to see you in person finally. We haven't gotten a chance to see each other in person always, but just great to see you all. I'm really excited to continue to partner with you in supporting your journey to selecting your new superintendent, which is one of the most important decisions you can make because it's your only employee. And so we're really honored to partner and support you in this last kind of phase of the process. So there's a couple things I'll share for open session. As you know, this is a confidential matter, personnel matter. So there's some things we'll do in closed session afterwards, just to ensure that you all are ready for kind of the next steps on the journey. So just a couple of things just to share with you. You all have your information in front of you regarding the search calendar. And so what I want to do just real quick is as you, and maybe I'll pause for a moment if you want to clarify kind of how you want to go with the process first before I jump right in, and then clarify kind of the piece that needs to be done in the confidential space. So let me pause just for a moment just to double check before I jump in.
Is there a specific process or?
We should probably approve the contract.
Yeah, I was thinking before I start.
Okay, cool.
Put this on.
Or I guess any discussion before take a motion? If not, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Testing.
Just for the proposal, for the contract, yes.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions around that, so I don't mind making the motion to approve the proposal as provided.
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Okay, please continue on.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to put this on the lapel to make sure. Does that sound okay? Still loud enough? All right. So one of the parts of the process is we do need to solidify the calendar. So that's really important because you have a pretty quick timeline, and based on the subcommittee talking to Trustee Jordan and President Koo, we've had a chance to get a pretty good sense of what may work well for you. So I'm going to present it to you today, and then we may need to just make a few adjustments. But the calendar I'm sharing with you is pretty tight, but we can get everything done, if that makes sense. And so there may be a couple of board meetings. You'll be a little later than normal, but this is just part of the process. So part of what I want you to think about, and I'm referring to the search calendar is where I'm at now. And so it is quite detailed because I wanted you to see in between the times we meet what the consultants are doing, so you have a good sense of what the process entails. And so I mentioned earlier that there's the open session piece, which is like now, like really being transparent about what the schedule is. But there are some things that are more confidential that we'll talk about later tonight, which includes, you know, looking at the candidates, obviously going through your interview questions, really solidifying your criteria, which drives the questions. And so normally when we work with boards, we typically have the opportunity to start in the beginning of the process. And one of the things that's super important is having criteria. Typically we pick 5 things, and those criteria really drive the process. So the great news out of this, which I really appreciate, is that you all have done a lot of the front loading of the work, but we want to ensure that there's an opportunity to get more feedback from your community around what those attributes should be of this new superintendent. So I've built in some space for that, even though it's a short period of time. So I'm glad there's a few folks here who can spread the word that there's some input we want to get pretty quickly. And so this calendar, again, just to give context, is a pretty quick process, but I think we can get it done. And so thank you, Superintendent Vidalis, for your help in herding the cats, as I call it, because there's a lot that happens through this process. But we're going to make it as smooth as possible for you and really get you to the space of feeling like you've done I call it unturn every stone to make sure you have really made your final decision with as much information as possible. Okay, and so I'm just going to start on the calendar in itself. So starting from when you first kind of were in contact and we decided to, you know, move forward with potentially partnering, we've already done a little bit of the front loading of the work. There's actually a kind of a draft calendar, which I'm going to go through now. And so I'm going to skip to where we're going today in terms of just thinking about how you may identify and really review your stakeholder input. And so if you want to take a moment to just think about the input of your stakeholders is one piece, but then there's also another layer that you all would have to decide once you do your interviews is, do you also want to have stakeholders give input? And sometimes there's interview panels that include stakeholders. So that's something that I'd want to ask you all to discuss tonight and think about if that's something you want to do. Some boards like to do that. We call it an open process. And then others like to make it closed process and it just be the board that does the internal interview. So part of what you're going to see tonight is also a schedule of what that could look like once you decide how you want that process to look. Okay. And sometimes that actually is done once you've gone through looking at applications and making those determinations. So that's something that may be something you have to determine in closed session, possibly. One of the things also that you'll notice is that there is a process of going through actually looking at the applications and actually determining how you want to consider how you will interview. And that sometimes is driven by the number of candidates. So we'll talk a little bit about that in closed session. As you look at the calendar, just real quick, you'll see that there's a space on the second page where we have the stakeholder input group. So I picked a week of the 19th through the 21st, which could be a space where the availability for me as a consultant can be available to hold 3 virtual meetings. So you have one for your community and your parents as well as your staff. So you're given those touch points. And then also there will be an online survey as well, which we'll look at the questions in a moment to make sure that you all have an opportunity for anyone to share input who can't come to the meetings. Okay, so you want to make it very accessible. And so that's an online survey, which I believe will be sent back tomorrow as a live link that we can actually start to put out. And we'll put that out in 3 languages, Tagalog, English, and Spanish. And there's a couple of questions that just help inform some of the things that your community may want to see in the next superintendent in terms of characteristics and anything they may have in terms of suggestions or comments around the process. So real simple process, but really informational. Because this is a short time frame, once we close out those meetings and we have the survey results, then I'll take a couple days just to compile everything and actually try to align it with potential criteria that can drive now your interview questions. Okay, so everything is always driven through criteria, meaning the attributes, and we typically pick 5 for you. Okay. In terms of a second board meeting, so there is a point where we would need to do maybe another kind of touch point before your interviews, just to make sure you have your final interview questions, you get this input from the stakeholders, and you can make an informed decision about what questions you want to select. Okay, so I did put a tentative date of October 26th. I think you may have another board meeting that day, I think. So it probably is about 30 minutes. It should be actually pretty quick. And I'll give you some pre-work you can look at ahead of time. So it should go pretty fast. The one caveat is I'm not sure about that day in terms of travel. So this may be a Zoom touch point if that's possible, but it's still tentative right now. And so I just wanted to throw that out there of just having some time on your agenda to finalize again your stakeholder input report, which will then drive your questions. Also an opportunity to, if you want to have stakeholders be a part of an interview panel, you will need to take action at that board meeting to actually appoint them as like an ad hoc committee, right? That really is part of this process. And so that's something you all may want to decide tonight if you want to have it as an open or closed process, meaning having stakeholder groups who are part of the interview panel. Okay, and so that's something we want to talk about. There is the interview process itself. So I selected, because of that board meeting, you're going to probably need to, push that out. So we selected possibly the 28th or 29th. And typically 5 hours is what I'll say, but it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be whatever you need. But you want to at least have a minimal of 5 hours to give time for all of your interviews. And you'll see the schedules I gave as options. So I want to make sure that you know that those are 2 dates that probably will work pretty well, but it is something you'd have to adjust some personal schedules possibly because it could be an all day. And I said could be, but it will be a long process. So I usually suggest not to go at night, but if you need to, we can make that work too. It'll just be a long night. Okay. And so that's where I'll go through kind of the process of what that will look like through with the schedules I shared. Fast forwarding to that next week is usually when you go through contract negotiations. Your attorney, the candidate, the finalist attorney will negotiate the contract. And I will say even prior to that, we'll walk you through the compensation parameters and help you with how that should look and could look as you go into negotiations. So we'll be a part of that process literally in your interview deliberations. So you'll have all that ready to go. And then if necessary, we can do additional reference checks. So because we didn't do the first set, right, that typically is our process. But if you need additional reference checks, anything like that, we can support that. And lastly, you would take action. November 9th, I believe, is the meeting that you plan to do this. And so you do need to take action in a regular board meeting to say this is our finalist we're going to enter into contract with and make that announcement. And then from there, starting July 1st is what I understand, that you want your new superintendent to start July 1st, which is actually a good time frame to overlap with your retiring superintendent. Kind of, I call it a bittersweet moment, but you have institutional knowledge to be able to make a nice, smooth transition. So that's the good news about your time frame. It's a pretty quick process. So I'm going to go into a couple of details about the schedule, but I want to pause and see if you have questions about the timeline so far, because it's pretty quick, but we can make it happen. So questions about the timeline? You feel like we can do it?
I will comment that it's a pretty ambitious timeline, but what I love is the person that's in the driver's seat. I'm gonna name that because we have a standing relationship with you and we have rapport. So because we understand how we work together, I think that that's a benefit to us. So I think with you driving us through this work, your style has always been to be very clear, concise, and intentional. So
you.
I have confidence in your leadership.
Thank you. It's a lot of pressure in 3 weeks of time, right? But we're going to make it happen. No, I appreciate that feedback. It is ambitious, but based on, I can think the vision of making that approval by November 9th, we had the backwards map, and this is just kind of like the best we could get it based on most of our availability, but this is where you all need to discuss that. Because this is, your subcommittee, obviously, we got a chance to chat, but now it's an opportunity for y'all to say, hey, we can commit. The main piece is going to be not only that second board meeting, because we do want everyone present to look at the applications, and we always want to have all 5 of you to be there to give your input, but the interviews is the most critical one, right? We never want to not have anyone there. So does the 28th or the 29th work better for you collectively? This would be a great time to look at your calendars.
So that would be a Friday night or a Saturday.
Yeah, Friday or Saturday.
I mean, my suggestion would not be to do Friday specifically because it's an evening and to the point that this is the first time we're doing this and it may last. I do not want to be here until 1 a.m. I think at that time, at least in my eyes, I'm no longer clear-headed. I'm not making a decision, right? Versus if we did it in the morning, again, this is my suggestion, we would have woken up with, it's a fresh pair of eyes, fresh thought process versus we've had a whole Friday, a whole week, and we're like, exhausted. So that would just be my suggestion.
I know.
We're going to get an estimate of what this is costing us.
Yeah,
it's in your
the estimate is about anywhere between $8,000 and $11,000.
I'm,
$8,000 and $11,000. Yeah.
I've been here 40 years and we've never had to spend that kind of money to get a superintendent. I'm just really amazed.
Okay. One question that I know some of you have this on your calendar that you've been invited to the Bayshore Community Day on October 29th. So I just wanted to let you know that would conflict. So I don't know, Mr. Ali, is that just the midday? Is it done by 1 o'clock? Would an afternoon work on the 29th? Oh, okay.
But it's obviously not a guarantee that we be out of here by 1 o'clock either, correct?
If you follow the process, I think you could actually. It's all about deliberation. The schedule will keep you on track, but deliberation is usually the unknown. Yeah. But I would guess yes.
And Ms. Anderson, you mentioned October 26th being a meeting that would need to occur through Zoom. 5 o'clock in the morning. Is there difficulty with making that later? That is a board meeting date. The board will be here in person from 7 until 8:30. If you're not able to be here in person, we can have you join us by Zoom, but the rest of us will be here.
Yes, and that was a very tentative time even throughout there. It may be just like tonight that if it's after some of your regular business, we could do that then because it's a pretty short period of time. And your best thinking to your point, is the later you get, it's like, but I think you'll be fine because it's very short. And I will give you a little bit of pre-work so you all can just be prepared to discuss pretty quickly and make a decision. So there's some potential flexibility on that day that I actually may be in person is still kind of up in the air. So that's why I put Zoom just to be on the safe side.
Okay.
So
timing wise, it would work before a board meeting or after a board meeting.
Okay. So 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or what's the other kind of?
We might be able to do it if it's just a half hour, if the board determines, a start time of 6:15 to do a closed session.
So what is that meeting for?
That meeting is for, Ms. Anderson, do you want to review what happens at that meeting?
Yes, so that meeting is actually the meeting where you all finalize your interview questions, because remember, you're getting input from your stakeholders, so we want to ensure that you can finalize your questions and also ensure that you are fully prepared for your interviews. Now, what we do need to make sure is if you all want to have a stakeholder panel, that's another layer to that meeting because you'd have to approve that group.
Okay, and so that's one piece I'd need to get direction on too, is do you want it to be where you have stakeholders as part of the interview process, or it just be the board interview, which boards have done either way. So it will require a little bit more footwork to recruit people to be on that, but it is something that you have enough time between now and your interview day to do that, but that would determine our planning.
Can I ask a question, President Koo?
Have we advertised for this position yet?
Yes, we have.
So why can't the board just look at those applications and meet and do it instead of going through all this other rigmarole? I mean, we've never went through this.
But the board decided at one of the meetings
I
that
think
they
that's the
wanted
meeting I missed.
possibly,
Yes.
and the board decided at
It's the
that
first
meeting
I'm
to
hearing
go
about it.
through this process. So, Ms. Jordan, you had a question?
Yes. What is the value in having a stakeholder panelist interview versus not having?
So the value of it is giving you another layer of information to make your final decision. So some boards like to hear kind of what the stakeholders view, and it's not a rating or anything of that nature. It's more of what were the strengths, what were the areas of opportunity or growth. Some will call it concerns or wonderings, but that summary then is one more layer of information that you have as a board to make your decision. One of the benefits of doing that also is, I call it, giving a proper introduction to the new superintendent with your stakeholders. A lot of times with the closed process, stakeholders do not necessarily know who that is because it's all confidential. And then what happens is that, it's their first kind of introduction to the community on November 9th, right? Or when you make your press release. So there's benefits to it. I think some of the challenges where boards get concerned is because of confidentiality. So although we have an affidavit statement that you all have to sign as well, right? Confidentiality statement that this information is never shared, of course, but also if you have a stakeholder group, they also are expected to do the same. So there's benefits, but there's also, concerns that boards have had. So it's really up to you. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just another additional set of information that will help you make a decision.
So I did have a question around coordinating the recruitment of the stakeholders. Would that be something the district would do, or would that, okay. All right.
Yeah, so what we typically do, and I would probably connect with your superintendent as point of contact to help do the recruiting. A lot of times we'll talk about like who you want to have represented. So thinking about your key stakeholders, we often ask, you have a student, typically in elementary district, you have a student who's like a middle schooler. Because you want to get their perspectives, very interesting, having parent, having your bargaining unit representation, really going through, every stakeholder that particularly you think is valuable to this process. I even say community partners are also ones that we've seen. So it is an extra step of work because you'd have to recruit them and you'd have to share with them. It's a commitment they'd make for that day. And then from there, you would have to approve them because now you're bringing them into a process that would be like an ad hoc committee, right? That they would be not making recommendations, but giving you input on the process. So.
You also mentioned that there's going to be a survey that we could send out to the community. We're not deciding on that tonight, right? That's going to happen. That's one of the steps.
Actually, yeah, that's one piece I'll share with you, the questions that we want to put out, just because I think the information will then inform you about how you want to, one, hear from the stakeholders and what they want to see, but then it can help inform your interview questions as well in terms of what we call criteria. So I can share that in a moment if you all feel like you want to determine the stakeholder component or not in terms of the interview piece, because that's going to determine a little bit of the amount of time for your upcoming meetings.
I think like you said, we front loaded a lot of this process. So just listening to my colleagues and the questions that they're asking, I don't think we need this extra committee.
Mr. Vidalis, I'll ask you a question. Have you put out an open? Have you advertised for the position, and has there been people that have applied?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. Okay, I would like to know and get the information.
This is why we're having a closed session after this meeting, okay?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I did miss the last meeting, and I'm sorry.
Yes. The question that's still on the table is we're going to do a closed session on the 26th, either right before or right after our meeting. We'll coordinate with Ms. Anderson. In terms of the interview time, there's two date options. There's Friday the 28th, it would be an evening, and there is Saturday the 29th, which is a morning. In terms of your calendars and availabilities, which of those might work? And Ms. Anderson, is there a day in the following 2 days, like on the 30th or maybe even the 31st, God forbid?
That has happened. Yeah.
I would say my preference is probably the Saturday. I think just so that we aren't sort of forced against trying to go to sleep versus being able to have the day if we need extra time to talk, which I think might be valuable, especially for making sure that we actually make the right decision during the interview process.
Kind of tuning out. I don't hear everything you said.
So Mr. Koo is suggesting the Saturday, the 29th, in that morning.
I have that written down, so.
What time are we talking about?
8 to 1 is what's being proposed.
So this is for actually interviewing the
Candidates.
Candidates.
and there's no so I heard the 31st. Did you say the 31st?
I said,
Yeah,
I just asked, are those days available? Like,
It's just for me, I'm not used to doing business like that on a Friday night or on a Saturday morning. I'm used to doing that kind of business like on a Tuesday or Wednesday in the middle of the day or early in the morning, but I just don't, I don't know. It's,
Yeah. So to give context, remember you all have a pretty quick time frame. So we really were trying to make magic happen in a short period of time. So that's part of the crunch. I will say also because of the nighttime experience, typically we don't do interviews in the evening. It's just very rare. It can be done though. So most of the time our interviews are 1 to 2 days, and Friday and Saturday is actually pretty typical, actually. So yeah.
You keep saying we. Are you doing an interview?
So I will be here, but I also work for, I represent McPherson. And so there is a team of us. Some of them you don't see, but they make this magic happen too. And so I say we, so I will be the person facilitating.
Oh.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I'd say we a lot,
40 years is the first time that I've ever been involved with hiring a superintendent this way. I'm just amazed.
I understand. Yeah,
well,
I understand.
if we do this on Saturday morning, Superintendent Vidales knows I need to go to the block party in Bayshore, and it starts at 11, so I wouldn't be able to stay until 1 o'clock.
Okay, so that probably would be a conflict for the board because we never not want to have a member present.
Right.
So I'll throw this out. This won't be a popular idea, but there is an option of turning this into a 2-day process, and you could do interviews on Friday and come back and deliberate on Saturday. That is an option, and you could get that done before that 11 o'clock time, and you can then do your interviews Friday evening. So it would kind of satisfy both needs. And I'm available both as well, so we can make that work, but it would require like a kind of a 2-day commitment, which is, I don't know if you actually wanted to do that, but it is an option to ensure all 5 of you are there. So I'll throw that out there. No takers on that one?
Ms. Anderson, do you have availability on the 1st, November 1st, with that Tuesday?
So here's the dilemma is that now you're going to push up against your timeline to do negotiations and be prepared for November 9th. So that's why I backwards map, because you typically have that time frame.
I think we can have a board item on the agenda for the 9th. And if we don't have, we do have another regular board meeting scheduled for November 16th if we needed it. So if we run up to a negotiation stalemate or we do have November 16th as an opportunity for a regular board meeting to approve the employment agreement, which would be should be less than half an hour meeting.
Got it. So that would change the whole dynamics of your search to give you a couple more weeks.
I actually have a question before you respond to that.
Yeah.
So with the elections, though, how does that affect?
It doesn't affect anything. This
Okay.
board serves until the second Thursday in December.
Okay.
So everybody's still a board member of this.
True.
President Cook, is it weird for me to just put out there that we're asking some questions, but we also made decisions to hire from internally? We're not doing a broad search per se, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, right? So
So those would be your closed session conversations about applicants, but share your point. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, I just think some of the questions we're asking are like we're acting like we're not hiring internally. So I think I would like Superintendent Vidalis to focus us again back to what we need to just answer now so that we can move forward.
So one possibility might be that we make that decision about interviews during closed session.
Yep.
Because you'll have a better sense of the applicants and what might be needed.
Right.
So
Are we able to do
could-
that tonight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on.
So November 1st, I'm just double checking the calendar, could be an option in the afternoon. So if I know that's during the day, I'm not sure how that works for you during the workday, which I think was the other thing we were trying to avoid is work schedules. But November 1st is an option, or if you want to push it to later in that evening, that's an option too. And I think it won't change our time frame too much either. So that's the good part. It actually may give us a little bit more time for your stakeholder input to happen. We can keep the survey open a little longer, maybe a couple days longer. So that's an option, is November 1st, if you want to push it back out and you feel like that will work. That's a Tuesday. And we would say Tuesday, probably, you all based on your work schedule. So
Well, why don't we continue our discussion with the superintendent and then get back to,
Okay, I just needed to know if Ms. Anderson was going to be available to facilitate that evening, afternoon, so.
and we need to make a decision now, because if not, then what'll happen, remember, this is the board meeting that you have to decide your process. So I do need to know the calendar so that we can continue forward with the process, or else I won't have direction on how to proceed with our time frame. So,
Well, anytime 4:30 or later works for me.
okay. So maybe.
Other board members, November 1st at 4:30?
weren't we going to talk about it today? A little while or something, you said?
Well, you still need to do interviews, so we're setting
No,
that.
I thought you just got done telling me that we can discuss it.
I think the what could be discussed further is just how complicated you want to make your interview opportunity, but you do need to decide on an interview date.
Yeah.
So if November 1st at 4:30, is that doable for those of you that have employment responsibilities up until that time?
Yeah, I need like 5:30, 6 o'clock, unfortunately.
Okay, so you need a 6 o'clock start time?
Yeah.
Or maybe here's a workaround. Can we do a Friday from 5 to whatever, and then on that first do it from like 5:30? Is that enough time?
Say it again, I couldn't hear you.
Say 5 to 9 o'clock for that Friday, and then the Monday or whatever would be.
So still have like a 2-day process where you do deliberations on November 1st?
It sounds like a 2-day process from what I'm hearing. Makes most sense from everybody, I believe.
Mr. Gonzalez,
So your
we have applications? You said we do?
yes.
Okay, can we base it on that and then decide how much time we need and how we can make it available for everybody?
So Mr. Koo's proposition is to schedule the Friday night, and then do another couple hours of deliberation on the 1st.
Yeah, or I mean, I could do Saturday too, whichever.
Or
works.
Saturday morning.
I'm pretty open, so I've opened up my schedule.
That might work, Friday night and Saturday morning, and we'll decide to what extent both of those are needed. But at this point, that's where we're going. You got that?
Second.
I don't. So repeat one more time. So yeah, you all can make a
So
a committee. Yeah,
so
make a
Friday night, the
committee. It's not
28th.
taking action, but yeah. So
Friday night, the 28th.
Okay. And then
And then Saturday morning.
Okay.
the
Take
29th.
November off the.
Yeah.
All right.
That was the only thing we
Everyone
needed
okay
to
with
do,
that?
right? And the 26th is going to be a closed session, either by Zoom or in person, before or after our meeting. And
No Zoom meetings.
I know the rest of us will be here. It might be she
We
may
had
need
the
to.
problems before.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And so this helps, thank you, because it's hard as a search firm to move forward without your calendar. And also this is a transparent process, so you want the community to understand what the timeframes are. Closed session will go into the applications, the interview process, you name it. One last question before closing out this piece is we did decide we don't want a stakeholder panel, and that would be an interview panel. Is that okay? Got it. That helps to plan the rest of your schedule. So with that being said, this will be updated. I'll send it back to you. And often what we ask is that in your transparent process of your search, the search process, like if you have a space where you want to share it with the community, either in your board minutes or your website, it's up to you. But your process has kind of already gotten to the end. So I just want to make sure we're good on our schedule. And this is really helpful for us to be able to move forward as a firm. So.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and take a vote and an action on this? So you can say, the timeline as presented, with the addition of possibly October 29th in the morning. I think everything else, and then no stakeholder interviews.
What are we doing?
We're approving the timeline because we're going to post this on our website and we're going to make it part of.
Advertise.
Well, to let the community know what's happening and what's the board's decision-making process. People want to know.
Explain that to me again.
People want to know when the board will select the next superintendent and what are the different milestones. And so often, school districts put this up on a website and communicate this out to the community so people know.
So maybe I misunderstood what you said before. Did you already advertise this
The
position?
position has been advertised, yes.
And have we gotten people that applied?
For the 4th time, yes.
Okay. So you're going to let us know now who they are?
In closed session, personnel
Okay.
matters.
Okay, that's okay. I just
Yeah,
want
okay.
to make sure because we're bouncing around like
No. It's all the same information.
Yeah, so if I understand the motion right, Superintendent Vidalis, it is that we will not have a stakeholders
Interview
participate in this process, and that we are looking at having an evening session on the 28th, and then the second session on the morning of the 29th. And so I'm making that motion as discussed. I'm making the motion for approval.
second.
First and second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Anderson. If you can get that to us, then we could.
Thank you, Ms.
post that.
Anderson.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I look forward to closed session so we can finish the rest of the process.
Okay, cool.
All
Thank you.
right? Thank you.
Next item is item 14. Persons wishing to address the board on any unagendized or closed session items. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on or address the board on any issue that is under the board's jurisdiction and not on the agenda or in any item addressed in closed session. Maximum time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. Are there any speakers? There are no speakers. Seeing none. Item 15, governance team member comments, reports, and board meeting reflection. I will start on my left. Trustee Ali.
Let's see. I think we did a good job of listening actively and communicating openly and respectfully. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, no, I have no comment. It's a good meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Ali. I concur that I believe we did well with listening actively and communicating openly and respectfully, especially around the process of picking the next superintendent. I know there was this is a big deal, big shoes to fill. We're just trying to get it right. We did commit to this very ambitious timeline, but we live very busy lives, and we were reminded of that tonight. So that was a little moment of reflection, but I'm so glad that we've come to a decision, and I'm confident that we will get through the process fairly and expeditiously, and that's what I love about this board. We're going to dive in together. So as we approach Halloween, I love seeing everyone be in that celebratory mode. I love seeing everyone out at ceremony. I mean, that is, every time I'm in that neighborhood, it just gives me such warmth considering all that we've endured these past 2.5 years. So I'm holding on to that, and I'm looking forward to being a part of this process, Superintendent Vidalis, as we, prepare for your retirement. It's tough.
Party.
It's tough, but I appreciate that we can continue to contribute and deliberate respectfully. We face a lot in this community, and that's what I love that we have here, a level of respect. So have a great rest of the week. I look forward to the conversation in closed session. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Mr. Vidalis?
Likewise, I think glad that we made some decisions and that we can move forward in this process. Thank you.
Well, echo all the comments. Great conversations. Looking forward to the conversation in closed session. And that's it for me. So other than that, we will convene to closed session at, we'll take a 5-minute recess, convene back at 8:45 p.m. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for attending.